Can you guess? Sex, food, and money. Hello everyone, welcome. Rabbiabe here. Today we're going to talk about lust. In fact, this is at the request of one of our friends, Alvaro. And really to everybody, when you have suggestions, please put them in the comment section because it will help me get an idea of what you would like me to speak about. Lust. What is it that we lust? Okay, so here we go. The three major lusts in life are... Can you guess? Sex, food, and money. And I'm not saying that they're necessarily in that order because it differs from person to person. But they are still the three major forms of lust. Let's define lust. In the ancient Aramaic or Hebrew, lust is called ta'ava. Ta'ava. That's the word for lust. But what does it really mean? It means that we have a desire for something, and everything begins with a desire. Desire is not bad. Let's first get that clear. In fact, we, as aspiring Kabbalists, we want to learn how to increase our desires, but in a very specific way. But what is lust? It is a desire that I do not control. I am not in control of it. It controls me. It overcomes me. Now, sometimes this is willingly, and sometimes this is unwillingly. As an example, I may be on a very specific diet, but I'm unable to control myself. And while I do not want to eat a particular food, I do not want to eat, let's say, sugar, cakes, because I swore it off, yesterday. And here comes the cake. I was presented with that opportunity actually yesterday. In fact, it's true for me. And it's very difficult. I have to tell you, I was successful. Thank God. No applause. But it is very difficult. It's very difficult, especially when you see everyone else around you enjoying that thing. But for whatever reason you have, could be spiritual reasons, could be dietary reasons, energetic reasons, or, simply health reasons that you might do that. And many people, are doing that. As an example, so very difficult to control. And then, of course, once you give in a little bit, then the tendency is, I gave in already, so now I give in a little more, and, you understand the rest of the movie, right? Eventually, you're eating the entire cake. So, again, what is the mechanism of lust, and what's really behind it? So, if you saw the video, and if you haven't, you can go back, of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. What is the recap? What does that mean? The sin of Adam. Well, what was the sin of Adam? Now, the Rabbi Isaac Luria says that the sin of Adam was that he didn't want to connect with the tree of life. He preferred the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Now, what does that mean? What's good and evil? Let's examine it, very practically, okay? It means sometimes things are good and sometimes they're bad. Means you're happy, you're sad, you're lucky, you're unlucky. This seems to be the world that we live in for most people, okay? You live at the moment and at the mercy of the moment. That means you're not in control of your moment. Can you be in control of your moment? Well, Adam actually was before this so-called sin of the tree of knowledge, okay? Again, what we explained is he connected to the external and for whatever reason preferred the external over the internal, okay? Now, let's take sex as an example, okay? Everyone's ears have perked up now, I think. Sex. What was sex like for Adam and Eve? Okay? Well, I'll tell you what it says in the Medrashim and in the more secret books, that sex was not at all like we understand sex today. Two people getting together, flesh getting together and having intercourse, again, as we understand it. And the pleasure also wasn't the same as we experience the pleasure of sex. Not at all. So what was it? First off, Adam was very different. He was a very different, we can call it, type of creature, okay, where according to the ancient Kabbalists, again, he was different. I won't go into all the differences because it might be too far of a stretch for many of us, but he had different skin. His skin was like the material of our fingernails, okay? Our fingernails. And it's interesting, at the end of the Sabbath, we have a certain ritual called the Havdalah. And Havdalah literally means separation, but it really means separation from the negativity that can appear to us in the week and bringing the spiritual light of the Sabbath into the rest of the week. So we are separating ourselves from negativity, not separating ourselves from the light of the Sabbath. Of course, that's the Kabbalistic understanding. Now, one of the things that we do over there is we light the flame of a candle and we look at the reflection of the light of the candle in our fingernails. Now, many people, you might even be doing this if you're an Orthodox Jew, let's say, you may not understand the reason. Now, while there are levels of reasons and levels of understanding, the Kabbalistic understanding is we do that to help us go back to the light and the expression of light that Adam once had when he was completely built from this structure of skin, so-called. It was a total protection against pain. He didn't feel anything externally. He felt everything internally. Now, we'll get back to that in a minute. So by doing this reflection of the light of the candle, what are we actually doing? We are going back to that original time prior to the sin of Adam. That's the intention of the Kabbalist, to go back to prior to the stage of consciousness that Adam once had before this sin of Adam. But since now the fingernails are the result of the negativity that was created, whatever that was, we'll get to it, this is the remnants, leftovers. And now the fingernails have a lot of negativity attached to them because they are now a connection to the sin of Adam. We want to bring it back, and therefore we look at the reflection of the light, but the fingernails themselves do carry negativity. And the Kabbalists explain many things about that. One should be careful how to discard the fingernails, and a pregnant woman should certainly not walk over cut fingernails. Okay, without going into details, if the best you can do is dispose of them in the toilet, that's okay. Some people burn them, bury them, whatever. This is not a class about that. The point is the consciousness of Adam and the physical manifestation of Adam before this sin of tree of knowledge of good and evil was different. What was the difference? Adam and Eve felt everything on an internal level because they were created, connected completely to the internal. So, what was the sin? That they connected to the importance of the external more than the internal. Now, that's not a short discussion. We talked a bit about it in the class about the tree of knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life. All right, go back. You can take a look at those two video classes. But the point is, when we put more emphasis, because that's the shift of consciousness that happened and it came along with, it came along with the shift of physicality as well, because Adam went from being shining and protected, like the fingernails at that time, he became flesh like this, what's called the skin of the snake. Flesh skin, which is subject to pain, which is subject to also physical feelings in the external. Okay? Now that's important. I'll explain why. But he became the more physical being and now also subject to harm from the animals, from the elements, and so on and so forth. Like we are today, much like we are today. Now, this metamorphosis didn't happen in 1 second. Okay, it's not important, but the point is there was a change. In fact, the light, which in Hebrew is or, very interesting, or in Hebrew, I'll spell it out, Aleph, Vav, Resh, which means light, became or Ayin, Vav, Resh, which sounds exactly the same, but it means leather, the skin. He got, the Bible says God gave them leather aprons, okay? Leather aprons, because they were embarrassed and all that, right? Leather aprons. What are these leather aprons? This physical skin, that's the leather aprons, okay? So the skin, the skin of light became a skin of flesh. All right. Now, what does this have to do with lust? Well, lust is all about being connected and not in control of the external feelings, external desires, or rather desires for the external. Now, the 3 major lusts in our life, you can probably guess, are food, we mentioned it, sex, and money. Now, again, for each person, it may be a different priority. For one person, maybe money is more important because through money, you can get maybe more better food and better sex, okay? A note that food and sex are very much connected. Why? Because sex is necessary to create life, and food is necessary to sustain life. Okay? So again, in those 2 areas of food and sex, that connection between them also makes them also very susceptible to negativity. Very susceptible to being only connected to the external of them. Now, again, what is the problem with lust? Lust means I'm totally connected with the external. It's controlling me in that moment. Now, what are the ramifications? Well, I'll tell you this, and again, this is a long discussion, and I don't want to make it a long video. It is for future videos, but when we are connected only to what we'll call the 1%, which is the external of things, because there's always an internal. There's the force of energy within. But the external is what controls us in that moment. The internal doesn't control us. The opposite. It's almost like we need to fight to connect to the external. Look at it this way. You don't have to fight off sugary foods or cakes. Unless you're going on a diet. But it's very easy to desire. That's what I mean. Imagine if we had the same desire for kale or for green beans. Imagine you have to fight to restrict that desire because of green beans, green vegetables. We don't generally lust those things, If you're like me, you have to really fight yourself to eat them. It's kind of the opposite. In other words, the things that are really good for us, the tendency is, we have to overcome something to do the positive things in life, because it's a creative thing. It creates better. It creates good for us. Things that are creative are more difficult, and things that are destructive are easy. Destruction is easy. You just need a kid and, $10 worth of dynamite. Not hard. But how long does it take to build a building? A long time, right? Creation takes effort and energy. Destruction doesn't take effort and energy. So destructive behavior as well also, it's one of the ways to tell. Is it hard for me to do or is it easy for me to do? Is it my nature? Because our nature generally has that destructive piece attached to it. And that's why it ends. It ends. Selfish food ends. Selfish sex ends. Think about it. Selfish sex, when it comes only from lust, without the love factor. It's only lust. The minute it's over, it's end. It's over. What do I mean? You may not even like the person after it's done. You roll over and go to sleep. Why is that? Why isn't there more continuation to the energy? Well, when there's lovemaking, there is continuation. There's more cuddling. There should be more kissing. There's more continuation to the energy. In fact, sex is one of the strongest energies that we can tap into. And that's what Adam tapped into. Adam and Eve, the way they had sex, wasn't sex just for the desire. It became that way, but it's amazing what the secret books say about the connection between Adam and Eve. It was totally internal. It wasn't the pleasure of an organ externally. It was a level of soul pleasure that you and I can't even imagine. And it wasn't only them that benefited from the union. All of the creation benefited from the union that Adam and Eve had. All the animals benefited. Nature benefited. Everything benefited from the union between Adam and Eve before the sin of Adam. Before the consciousness shifted to becoming more interested in the external. Now, that's the proverbial second bite. You see, the first bite was no problem, because they didn't know what it was. But once they felt the pleasure, this intensity, they lost their consciousness for the internal, and they became focused on the external. And so when we are focused on external, and again, we can't control the desire, that's called the lust. And again, what's the benefit of the lust? Very high, very instant gratification. That's amazing. There's no gratification like that, except what? It ends. It ends perhaps abruptly, perhaps over some period of time, but you're guaranteed it will end, and there are consequences. There are consequences. We receive spiritual blockages. So without getting into that whole discussion, but what I will tell you is the reason why when we become addicted to things and addicted to high forms of energy. Let's say, drinking is a high form of energy. Drugs can be a high form of energy. Sex is a high form of energy. Eating is a high form of energy. Money also, again, money only for its own sake because there's an agenda behind it can be also addicting. Again, what is this addiction? Addictions, the base of every addiction is that I become a little bit more covered each time. So I don't feel exactly the same pleasure the second time around, and the third time around it's a little less because we get more energetic, barriers, coverings. We have a name for them. They are called klipot. Covering. So what happens when you feel covered? When you're covered, you don't know that you're covered, but you just don't feel the same thrill. It's not the same as it was the first time. Was amazing. So how do we compensate? Think about it. We all do this. A little more. We need to do a little more. And the consequence of a little more is, guess what? More coverings, more coverings. This eventually becomes a vicious cycle. And soon, it's difficult to get happy. We're so obsessed and we're so busy. And we become, again, whatever the consequences of overeating can be, whatever the consequences of being addicted to sex, or, now it's not enough to me just to be with, one person, maybe more, multiple partners, or different ways, different things, and I'm not happy with, difficult to get happy for many, many people. Very interesting. Again, so it's like this in everything. This is the basis of every addiction, whatever it might be. How to break this cycle? Well, obviously, there's no short answer to that, but it's about breaking the cycle. Addictions must be replaced with positive force, which is for another video. But the first step is to be aware. Am I addicted? What is my lust? By the way, we may not even be aware what our lust is. Is it food? Is it sex? Is it money? Is it anger? That's also possible, okay? So, first step is to be aware of our lust, the behavior of our lust, and to begin to analyze it. Where does it come from? What is it, what if I wouldn't have it? How would I feel then? And then to see what you can replace it with, what positive thing you can do to replace it with. As an example, if someone is addicted to cigarette smoking and they want to give it up, one of my recommendations might be to use one of the spiritual tools that we have in our arsenal, and at the same time to have 10 sips of water whenever you crave a cigarette. Now that can also be used for food addictions and so on. Spiritual tool and water. Why? I won't get into right now. But we must replace, because you cannot give something up and only give it up. Because right now you have a place where energy needs to be. You are getting energy from smoking. Now, for whatever reason you decide to quit, you have a lack. No, there's no such thing as a lack that just stays a lack. If you don't fill it with something positive, negativity will enter. I guarantee you. And that is reason why. What do most people do when they give up smoking? Yes, they start eating. So they replace one habit with another habit and they gain 20 pounds. Okay? Not the answer. Not the answer. I don't say continue smoking, but you must know how to quit properly and replace with something which is positive energy, positive consciousness, and so on. Okay, more to come. Be blessed. Thank you very much for watching the video. Give it a thumbs up on YouTube. Subscribe if you're not already subscribed. Hit the bell icon. And please comment and let me know more of what you would like to hear on YouTube. Thanks for watching. All the best.